My guest today is Aaron Krowne. Aaron is the partner and practice group lead blockchain and corporate at Industria Business Lawyers, also known as, I think, simply IBL Partners, a technology forward distributed law firm. Fascinating stuff. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Andy, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. Look, we'll dive right into the legal stuff shortly, Aaron, but it'd be useful maybe just here at the top of the show if you could please just introduce yourself. Love to hear a little bit of background, anything personal and professional that is pertinent and has kind of, I guess, led you on this path to becoming a lawyer that essentially specializes in blockchain related stuff. Yeah, please introduce yourself. Go for gold.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm an old tech hand. Was building my own computers and, taking them apart from the early 90s, getting into, Linux and open source software at that time. So go way back with sort of just tooling around with computing tech and sort of the whole open commons kind of approach to it. And I just took that forward into what I was into for the decades after that. So I did go to school for computer science. I got a master's. I then went into, I should say in school, I was in the research software development context, so R&D, software dev. Worked with search engines, information organization, information visualization. In effect, that was during my master's, and then did sort of the same thing after my master's as a head of digital library research in Murray University's general library. So it was essentially data science, but not all that at the time. Long later. So did that for until the mid 2000s. I also started a website which was basically like a math Wikipedia type site with a co-founder in the early 2000s. It in fact predated Wikipedia by a little bit, so I think we're pioneers in that sense. So that got some notoriety. Later, I did a site which is a community, basically reporting and whistleblowing site and community forum about the financial crisis. It was called mlimplode.com. That got some more notoriety. But I essentially switched from being in the software R&D academic setting over more towards online startups business. And with that, as things got more and more legalistic, I sort of thought about the legal side of things. Hey, I can do this. So I changed track, went to law school, just thinking initially at the time, this is useful to use in business and on tech startup endeavors. It'd just be good to have these credentials. But sort of got Stockholm syndrome, I suppose, and got really stuck into the practice of law from that and realized I could the knowledge of law and apply that sort of to the old me, people who are similarly situated, doing tech startups and other small businesses, and who were sort of lost in the legal world and the legal side of things, and frankly intimidated by it. While I was taking that track, also in 2008, as everyone knows, Bitcoin paper came out and Bitcoin, the network was launched shortly thereafter, and I was just immediately on it. I remember sharing the Bitcoin paper by Satoshi with friends as soon as it came out, saying, "Hey, check this out," and most people sort of raised an eyebrow, but a few also got really into it. So I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread, really, since the beginning. Played around with it sort of as a hobbyist, didn't do anything formal with Bitcoin or crypto for a number of years until after I got out of law school and was already practicing law, mostly for startup clients and some small businesses. I started to have them approach me, asking me about these ICO things. And so, it was 2017, the big ICO boom, and that was getting a lot of attention, and started to have these clients want to do something in blockchain and token offerings, and I just dove in, initially just helping them out on sort of pro bono basis, and then quickly got comfortable, and it became my core practice area and basically took over my life pretty quickly. So that has been my primary area of practice ever since around that time, 2017.
Got it. Thank you, Aaron. Look, you've obviously had a long and fascinating backstory in, the early advent, I suppose, of, online internet and distributed systems. And look, if we have time, maybe we'll circle back, because I see that, yeah, you were kind of involved early on in establishing several different online libel law precedents. And I think you mentioned also that you were involved in the early development of Creative Commons IP system. So, fascinating stuff. Maybe we'll circle back, but let's talk a little bit more about, we'll start with, IBL Partners, Industria business lawyers. So maybe just give us a little bit of the background on the law firm, origin story, and specialization, et cetera, Aaron.
Yeah, appreciate it, Andy. I'm terrible about talking about myself, so alley-oop helps. But yeah, so IBL, so it was basically a partnership of myself and the managing partner, Alexander Rodriguez, who was also, he actually had a tech startup that he was working on coming out of law school. He also sort of went into law school later, like me. He was sort of a later career move. So both of us bring to the table, business and tech knowledge and tech startup knowledge from before. And then we applied, our legal knowledge to that, law practice to that. So he was just looking around, in 2018 for people to work with to handle crypto clients and blockchain clients, and found me, I believe it was on LinkedIn, and we just got to talking and decided to team up basically. So, he has settled more into the practice management side of things, and I've settled more into sort of like the front office side of things, which is a great, a great division of labor. And yeah, we've just been trying to keep it going. Certainly during the down cycles, it takes some talent with the harsh down cycles, then growing as much as possible during up cycles. About the firm, so we're not 100% limited to blockchain and crypto, but it is sort of the core of our DNA. We were founded as a pure blockchain boutique. It's still most of what we do, but we're now sort of also open for business for other sorts of tech and innovation centric startups and other enterprises beyond that, and basically bringing sort of our skill set of being nimble to new emerging practice areas, and putting together in effect just-in-time teams on a matter-by-matter basis to serve clients efficiently, and taking all that and applying it to other areas besides blockchain. So if it's even an area where it's so new don't really use practice groups for it, you can bring it to us and we could look at it and decide if we're comfortable and want to jump in. So we're sort of that kind of a law firm. We'll think we're really on the cutting edge, and we're a good value proposition for so that's sort of the 10,000-foot view.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Aaron. And look, let's just get a little bit further context then on your website. You describe yourself as, like a distributed law firm for technologists, innovators, and industry leaders. So as you've identified, certainly blockchain, Web3, AI, technology in general. It'd be useful, Aaron. Look, I know that you guys are obviously based in the US, and the US is, it's a tangled web of regulatory uncertainty. So there'll be no shortage of work for people such as yourself. But just for the benefit of listeners, do you serve global clients? Is it specifically US clients, or how do you look at that?
Yeah, great question. I'd say probably about half and half. If you just look at crypto, for example, even if you're completely born outside of the US, you came up with all non-US founders, your primary market approach is non-US, you still probably have some concerns about, the long arm reach of US law and the SEC. So even that kind of client, we often are fielding their concerns with respect to the US, or even serving as a kind of global outside general counsel to field their approach to covering their bases legally, worldwide. This new clients, it's mixed. They have significant U.S. nexus, maybe some U.S. founders, and also significant offshore. And they're extremely highly indicated situation to have U.S. counsel to deal with those, intertwined U.S. concerns. And then, of course, some are just pretty much, all in, coming up out of the U.S. And then in any of those, the market approach might be into the U.S., focused out of the U.S., or a mix. And so in any of those situations, we probably, can help out and have a part to play at least. But in the cases where we're sort of a outsourced outside global general counsel, even if we're just kind of quarterbacking your legal coverage globally, we can do that. We can help you find, and we can work with local counsels all over the world, and we do that quite frequently. And it can be pretty useful capacity, we think, to just help navigate the whole legal universe, which not everyone is comfortable with and really wants to even do. So we can usually help there. We have sort of our most frequent team members that are our go-tos, even if they're on an outside contractual basis. We have an extended network where we can reach out and find people very quickly. You can be local legal counsels or specialized counsels. And in an area like crypto, you quite often need specialists that, for example, that all day something they do might be, sophisticated private funds. Others, something they do all day might be commodities regulation. So there are all these areas which could potentially be indicated depending on exactly what you're doing. And if we don't have the capacity in-house, we would generally aim to be able to find it and bring it on board to your practice team as quickly as possible.
Cool. Thank you for explaining that, Aaron. I think, though, let's talk about some specific US data points, just because it's fascinating, and it's particularly relevant, as you've identified, for anyone in the industry all around the world. It doesn't matter where they are. What is happening in the US obviously has ripples all over the world. One of the most interesting being a word that's doing a lot of work in this particular sentence, Aaron, of course, is the current US presidential cycle, for better or worse. Crypto is actually, it's not a leading point of discussion, but it's part of the discussion, perhaps for the first time in a US presidential election cycle. Donald Trump himself, actually, the Trumps launched, crazily enough, a DeFi project called World Liberty Financial just yesterday. They launched this thing. Of course, you'd have to say that, Donald Trump and the Republicans perhaps more generally agreed to be more favorable to crypto than perhaps the Democrats, especially obviously the Democrats under Gary Gensler's SEC. Look, a lot happening in this election cycle, but yeah, just interested in your perspectives in terms of what you see as kind of those data points for discussion, and how serious perhaps are the Democrats at engaging with crypto past the election, for example.
Yeah, really, really good points raised. And I would agree that, heretofore it has been the Republican side that was more serious and more sort of in the tank for crypto. You had a small-ish crop of congressional reps that were sort of the standard go-tos going back, to at least 2017, I think. I think that's when the Token Taxonomy Act was introduced. In congressional legislation has been getting introduced for a while, in that sense by that sort of crowd. But if it's just a mono-partisan undertaking, it tends to have pretty limited prospects. So a lot of it was, I think, it was good-hearted, but it was kind of maybe more virtue signaling to try to attract donors for a while, and wasn't really heavily negotiated with other stakeholders and across the aisle. So that is what it was for basically until the past year. And that's what's interesting, is that there's been really a sea change. I should mention also that even a couple years ago, Trump was still calling Bitcoin a scam. So this is a very late come to Jesus moment for him. But I think he saw that when he could sell NFTs, there was money to be made. So, take that for what it is. But even Trump wasn't included in that, the camp of the supporters in the government until pretty recently. So this past year, it has really changed radically. There were a few Democrats even last year that were supporters, and we actually sent some letters to them on some various issues. So I was already surprised when we surveyed that we had it was half dozen or so Democrats that were getting to be pretty strong on crypto. This year, it's probably doubled or tripled from that. I think we have 1 to 2 dozen Democrats that are pretty strong on crypto to the point of putting themselves out there as advocates in this cycle. So that's super encouraging, and I think it is genuine and bona fide, especially in that now we have one of the leading ones is Chuck Schumer, so the Senate Majority Leader, and that's certainly not nothing. It also shows that sort of boomer generation can get on board with this, and can serve as an example of advocacy of crypto as an area of innovation. It's not just millennials and younger, just some fad of theirs, but everyone can see that that there's merit in this sector broadly. So to me, that's sort of a milestone and turning point. There's actually concerted effort on the Democrat side now to advance legislation and to work on bespoke crypto legislation to really clarify things from the regulatory perspective and make the U.S. a destination for this. I think there's a crypto for Harris advocacy group and effort. There's quite a bit. I mean, Schumer, has said that a priority of his is actually passing the FIT21 legislation or some form of it by the end of the year. That's a pretty bold goal. I'd give it maybe a coin toss, but that's great that there's that kind of push behind it. So bottom line is now it's bipartisan, right? And I think not only do both sides see the potential fundraising benefits, but both sides actually do see it as an issue of innovation and just the U.S. forget about primacy, but not falling behind economically in this leading sector of innovation. And it's like you said, it's not the marquee topic in the election for sure, but it's in the mix, and I don't necessarily think it's the kind of topic that needs to lead on the debate stage. It is one of the leading areas of innovation. Certainly one that happens to take most of my waking hours, but there are others, right? There's green energy and climate tech and things like that. So it's not just about crypto, but I think to the extent those other areas are elevated as important industrial policy priorities and things to be focused on with legislation, so too should crypto. So that's a broad brush of my sense of the political landscape.
Sure. Thank you, Aaron. And look, have you followed the World Liberty Financial Project from the Trumps? And it's you mentioned that Trump saw an opportunity perhaps to make a buck selling NFTs. And look, let's not be too cynical about it, but Trump is a guy that over the years he is a kind of walking personification of the American capitalist dream, if you like. He's licensed the Trump name to everything from pizza to universities to skyscrapers to whatever. So from that perspective, I guess it's just a logical endpoint that he would do the same with NFTs. That said, it is a bit weird even for us in the industry to see a presidential candidate selling NFTs. and now him and his sons have launched this DeFi product, and there's going to be a governance token, and I'm sure they're doing it, reasonably carefully in terms of the various regulations. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think they are doing it reasonably carefully from what I've seen. In fact, I was a bit surprised at how careful, and I found out they have some good counsel on the team. So that's certainly why. But it's also let's call it a Trump branded effort, not necessarily, you know, let's say Trump engineered from from square one. So that's and that's how he does a lot of stuff, right? But going to the merits, I think there could very well be merits to it. I mean, there is, I think, a market for borrowing and lending, a peer-to-peer borrowing and lending out there, and it could be better served. And DeFi is a way to do that, and it's a compelling new way. You're removing the middlemen, and there's a lot of efficiencies to be had there and transparency benefits. So, to the extent that this bears out, that it is well engineered and transparent, it could absolutely take off in the market. So, I'm not down on it from that perspective. The caveat with anything Trump is, does everything surrounding, all the scandals surrounding, potentially get in the way? And, we already saw the hack attempts, right? It sort of attracts these sort of things. So that's something to be wary of. But on the legal and technical side, I'd say it does have merit and potential.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Of course, one of the things that is, I don't know if Trump will come across this hurdle, but under Gary Gensler, the SEC seemed to have this regulation by enforcement policy, right, which has been incredibly frustrating for everyone from the US exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken, right down to anyone who's ever tried to conduct an ICO. Of course, there was the SEC Wells notice against OpenSea, against Uniswap. It's pretty tricky from that perspective to be a founder in the US trying to get something going. Yeah, are we still concerned about the SEC and Gary Gensler? What any kind of regulatory clarity on the horizon, or is this just the dictate that they have, and that they're just on purpose, it seems, making it extremely difficult for crypto so far, Aaron?
Yeah, it's if we get legislation that's substantially like the FIT 21 Act, Financial Innovation in Technology for the 21st Century, I think it's called, FIT 21 for short. So anything like that passes, I think it would largely remove the ambiguity in terms of what falls under the SEC or what doesn't, and how exchanges are regulated or not regulated. And it takes care, I think, of a lot of the carve up between the CFTC and the SEC, which is currently ambiguous, as well as the question of what falls within the regulatory perimeter at all. So I think it would largely, for example, displace the need to be looking at the Howey test and ask 10 lawyers their opinion on how the Howey test applies to a particular instrument. You might get 10 completely different responses, right? That's a big problem today. So legislation substantially like the FIT 21, I think, would largely clear that up. It's not perfect, and there are things still to refine with that, but it is attacking the right problem, and I think it would do so at the right scale. So I do hope those efforts go forward and continues to shape up and eventually get passed. But in the meantime, we have the situation we have, which, as you said, is regulation by enforcement. The SEC, and Gensler, I think they kind of don't know what to do. I mean, Gensler even asked, at the beginning of his tenure for authority from Congress to regulate crypto. He's essentially asking for legislation. didn't get it. I mean, there's, largely nothing was getting through Congress, and there was not spirit bipartisan collaboration over this. That is starting to change. But yeah, so Gensler just sort of went off on his own, right? And his tool is by and large regulation by enforcement. So he used the tool he had, right? He's got the hammer, so everything looks like a nail. I think even from that perspective, he went from being relatively neutral or positive on crypto as a law professor to once he's in the regulator's office and sees mostly the bad actors and he's got that hammer, he wants to hammer in those nails, and that you can sort of see his perspective change. So, I think he could be more reasonable and measured, but I think it's also more a factor of him being in the regulator's seat and seeing some of the worst actors and, just, becoming, cynical and dated about that. So that's the situation we would still be in without this sort of comprehensive legislation. But on the plus side, in the last year and a half, the SEC has moved from mostly bringing in what I'll call easy cases against extremely bad actors, fraud or misrepresentation being the core of the enforcement, or those that just did a terrible, terrible job managing their projects or caring about SEC exemptions, even when they could have had an SEC exemption, perhaps not doing it or doing a poor job at the compliance. So there were a lot of easy cases brought from 2017 to the last year or so. This year, it has changed in the sense that the SEC seems to be trying to bring cases to actually see where the legal line is drawn on all the points and sort of sub-points of primarily where the line is drawn in the application of the Howey test in terms of whether a token is security. And then on the other side, where the line is drawn in terms of whether someone is a broker of securities. And that gets into whether your exchange or some other sort of intermediary, it happens that the token gets deemed a security. Is that sort of arm's length from you, or are you deemed the intermediary for the purposes of security brokering and exchanging distributing laws? So that's being hashed out in these cases. That is actually, in a sense, is a good thing. It's not as good as if we had comprehensive legislation preempting all this, but it's better than the state of affairs before, which is to bring these cases against, in almost all of them, outright frauds. And then you don't really learn anything about where the legal lines are drawn, and then you just get a bunch of hysteria, where people just freak out, about the seeming, basically boundless, range of the SEC's enforcement. But now the turn to cases they're really getting into the substantive legal issues. There's even pushback. I mean, the Ripple court, in the, summary judgment, actually it was, it was summary judgment, actually, not motion. The summary judgment motion, that came out, was it last year? Yes, it was last year. Losing track. That was one of the early developments in this new wave of cases. The court basically rejected 2 out of 3 of the SEC's claims. And these were on significant issues. This was the issue of whether programmatic sales and whether team distributions and grants were securities distributions. And the court said no. And more recently in Binance's case, that decision was actually reinforced explicitly. The judge, looked at that and said, yes, I agree. I'm going to, in fact, extend that to all secondary market transactions, not just disintermediated primary transactions. So, the SEC is taking some losses on some of these claims, not on the entire lawsuit, but that's fine. They don't have to lose on every claim, for there to be significant benefit to the industry and getting some additional maneuvering space in terms of where that line is drawn on these laws. And in the Coinbase case, I should mention as well, an important result. Coinbase Wallet was basically, exonerated for being, software through which you could trade in some coins later deemed by the SEC to be security. Well, that was a non-custodial wallet software, and really, Coinbase is not in the flow of that. So, the court said, well, in this case, look, this does not rise to the level of being a broker, right? So now we have a useful line drawn somewhere that says, you're not a broker of securities, even if these tokens are deemed securities. So useful result. But where's the next line drawn, right? We don't know to what level over routing contracts for, DEXs and other systems. And this is up in MetaMask as well. We just don't know where the line is drawn yet. And this is actually up for being reviewed in these cases now. So in that sense, the state of legal affairs here is advancing, and there has already been benefit to the crypto industry. So that's a long-winded response to what you said, but I hope it makes sense.
It makes sense, Aaron. Look, you did mention, I think it's called the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, FIT 21, right? So, you said that essentially this would bring some of that clarity to the US, but just give us a sense of, where the passage of that bill is at, and whether it's likely it will be passed in its current form or not, and what would happen given that the election is coming up if kind of either side won.
Yeah, so it passed the House already.
Yeah.
And it would be, if it doesn't get modified, it would go to the Senate, right? It didn't have the votes in the Senate, with Schumer. So that is sort of DOA in that sense with that Congress and with that administration. Some of that might be, well, if this gets, Biden's desk, will he sign it, or will he veto it? So, and on that note, Biden did veto Congress's override of the SEC's SAB 121 accounting guidance. So we can delve into that, but it was another crypto hot button issue where Congress actually did dive in and was ready to side with the crypto industry, and it was blocked explicitly by Biden. It's just that Congress didn't have 2/3 veto override strength, but it had close, and it was basically just Biden who foolhardily stopped that, stood in the way. So hopefully Kamala Harris can shake off that legacy. But you sort of see the dynamics here, and while even if transformative legislation might have majority in both houses of Congress, it could still run into a problem with the president and the administration. So that does appear set to change. In fact, it appears whoever gets in office, either side will be much warmer to crypto. I think Biden is just pretty much out of touch with it. It's not an issue to be kept up with, and it's probably just listening to those who are most down on it and most worried about just scams and frauds, as if it's not just like a feature of the internet itself. But yeah, so the prospects, circling back to that, like I said, I think I'd give it a coin toss, passing by the end of the year, but it'll probably take longer. I think it needs some improvement. We don't have to get too terribly into the weeds on that, but it does, I think, overly defer to the SEC, and it has a treatment of decentralized tokens, but it doesn't really have a treatment of utility tokens. And not every project is both, so that could create some problems. But as far as what it does, I'm probably going to get the terminology wrong, but it creates a carve-up between the SEC and CFTC. So that's the commodities regulator and the securities regulator. And so this is the rough way to think of it, is that if you have a coin that's not already completely decentralized, then you're in the SEC's purview, and you basically have to go to the SEC to sell this coin. It creates kind of a prospectus exemption. So, you report to the SEC and you put together essentially an offering memorandum and do some basic compliance around that. It's mostly transparency based, but then you'd be able to sell the coin. And then there are limitations on how much, ordinary unaccredited investors could buy into that. So that's on the SEC side. If the coin is completely decentralized, it's then treated as more of a commodity. So Bitcoin or Ethereum would be in this category. And doesn't even, port to go under the SEC's purview. So that would be treated as a different kind of asset. And again, I don't have the terminology. It's a bit arbitrary, but the second kind of asset would be able to be sold without SEC approval and even without CFTC approval. But it would have to trade on a CFTC registered crypto asset exchange. So then there would be exchanges on both sides. There's the CFTC regulated variety and then the SEC regulated variety. So you'll see commentary out there on the bill that, points out rightly that it creates a bifurcated market. And, there's certainly downsides to that. So that's sort of the dichotomy here. So it sort of takes care of that crypto asset classification, the carve up between the CFTC and the SEC, which are kind of quietly in a regulatory turf war over this, and then the regulation of the actual exchanges for these assets, which has been a huge problem, right? And that's why Binance and Coinbase are being sued, among others. So it would clear those things up. It provides a treatment, not necessarily perfect. Again, I think use work, but that's sort of the lay of the land of it.
Got it. Thank you, Aaron. Well, look, as we start to finish up this part of the podcast, Aaron, just for anyone interested in exploring more about the offerings from Industria business lawyers, your services, your history, where should people do? What should they do just to keep up to date with what you guys are up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So they should go to real easy, ibl.law, ibl.law, so 6 letters. And you can get to everything for us from there, contact or to sign up for our newsletter, links to all our people and, links to their socials. So yeah, it all starts there. So really easy.
Excellent. Well, that link is in the show notes, folks, but yes, indeed, IBL. .law. Look, Aaron, it's time to start moving towards the end of the show, and we do that, of course, by running you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. It's always good to put a lawyer through the hot seat. Are you up for it?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Let's do it, Aaron. I'm just going to run some questions at you. Just want you to give me kind of rapid fire, hot take style answers. Let's see what you have to say. Question 1 for you, Aaron, is where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'm not a maximalist. I'd say I'm always a centrist, always looking for the balance in things.
Yep, very well said. All right, very, very lawyery response, Aaron. The next question for you is, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Firmest conviction. That's very, very meta sort of question there. I guess, one I would say would be, and I haven't seen this around, is that kind of an extension of what I was saying before about being kind of in the open source world and commons-based, production of software or intellectual artifacts like Wikipedia and whatever content, I see crypto as kind of an economic extension of that. So it's like you can come together to build a shared information resource or see it as something that does something, it performs a service, and you can own an economic piece of it, right? The coin, um, which can also be functional. But it does not have to be the same sort of deal as you get with a share of stock, right? So you can make it whatever you want. This, I think, is extremely important as well as extremely unappreciated about the crypto sector broadly. I see it essentially as a new mode of economic production.
Yep. Very, very well said. Couldn't agree more, Aaron. Look, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. As someone who's been around since the early internet, Aaron, you'll kind of appreciate that kind of sentiment from Mr. Gates. But, with that in mind, 10 years is a long time. And look, anything you like, Web3, regulation in America, what does it all look like in 10 years' time, do you think, for the crypto sector?
Yeah, I think it will continue to get more professionalized, and it's already well along that curve, with comprehensive legislation, which looks like we'll get it eventually. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be, 6 months or 2 years, but I think it's coming sooner or later. That's going to, I think, even more unleash the floodgates, and allow it to move forward. It really has been getting held back in the U.S. and probably the world more broadly, because the U.S. is such a major player and is usually, at the forefront in terms of, innovation. But I think that will accelerate things. I see it as, in a sense, kind of a next sort of internet level important innovation that will move into the infrastructure of our lives. We may, laugh at the days before we had blockchain intermediated permission sharing of private information. We may one day laugh at the days when you had to have some sort of financial intermediary to virtually every sort of transaction. You may laugh at the days that, you had only a choice between, equity or like, commodity, like a piece of property, rather than something that could have attributes of both, and sort of pick and choose and have arbitrary attributes that are purpose-built and application specific. So I think it's to that level. Another way, or sort of another analogy, I guess, would be like the relational database. I mean, it's something which is in almost everything that we use. That's information based. But it was pretty new, even in the early 90s. It was just sort of this whiz bang thing. Certainly one which it wasn't popularly known, but it did take 20 or 30 years to move into basically ubiquity. And at the end of that, people don't think about let me go look up my information in my relational database. They just think, let me look it up in Excel or this or that, or really through a web interface that just happens to hold all my data somewhere in the cloud. So I think it's going to be an evolution, being professionalized, more consistently and sanely regulated in a comprehensive way, and then increasingly move into a lot of different areas, everything we use and interact with in the information space. And probably at the end of it, won't be talking about blockchain. It'll just be, what's inside computers and networks.
That's right. And look, let's hope it does not, in fact, take 10 years, but I think that's very well articulated, Aaron. Look, William Gibson, famous sci-fi author, famously said that the future is already here, Aaron. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
Yeah, there are a lot of these things. Basically, everything I already mentioned does exist in the form of a crypto or blockchain project. You can see them as more like pilot project level, or almost like basically live R&D that you can access and use. But a lot of this is out there. There are decentralized ID solutions. There's decentralized permission health information sharing, multiple initiatives for that. Certainly the DeFi, the whole DeFi landscape. There's all sorts of trading and borrowing and lending systems out there that you can use today, right? It's just more of a question of the maturity of them, the legal ability to use them in various jurisdictions, and how well they're worked into the tapestry of the markets and society, which is a big one.
Yeah, very well said. All right, brings us nicely, Aaron, to the final question, which is, what is your favorite science fiction, a book, film, or TV show?
That'd be very difficult for me to pick. Gosh, that's the hardest one. I'm very bad at picking favorites.
What comes to mind?
I'd say recently gained a new appreciation for Dune. I have to say that with the films.
Yeah.
I think it's a very cool concept of a world in which AI ran amok and then had to be sort of put back in a box, and then how did the humanity deal with that, and then of course mixed in with humanity going out to the stars. So I just sort of didn't get it when I was younger, but I've gained a new appreciation for it. So yeah, I do like things like that, and it's good for the imagination and creativity.
Yeah, I very much agree. I kind of the same for me. I never was certainly always aware of Dune as a youth, I guess, but yeah, it didn't grab my attention like I guess like Star Wars, Star Trek, or the list, Battlestar Galactica, the list goes on. But seeing those the two recent Dune movies, particularly the second one, absolutely incredible piece of cinema, and probably the best kind of theatre experience I've had in the last decade. Just seeing it on the big screen was, yeah, just profoundly good, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it prompted me to go back and get into the whole Dune chronology of the future, spending way too much time in that rabbit hole. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. It's good to have, these outlets for the imagination. So good question.
All right, well, great answer. We've reached the end of the show, Aaron. Look, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us, sharing your perspectives on, everything, I guess, legal, regulatory, and so on. Just to close it out, please do share with the listeners. I don't know if you hang out on Twitter, X, or LinkedIn, or wherever else you like to hang out online. Please feel free to share your social handles. And again, just shout out the website for, Industria Business Lawyers.
Yeah, check out IBL.law, just 6 letters. And you can find me on Telegram as well at Krowne Law, KROWNELAW.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. All the best, and bye for now.
Thanks so much, Andy.